Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams, coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints Hour. What happened to anti-Americanism since Obama's election? Why was the reenactment of the battle at the Plains of Abraham canceled? Political correctness or genuine security concerns? And do you support auto industry bailouts? Stay tuned. And these are the issues we're presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. Once upon a time, it was fashionable to be anti-American, but what has happened ever since Barack Obama was elected? Did we shift to a softer stance toward our neighbors, and why? Reenacting the battle at the Plains of Abraham, Quebec, to celebrate its 250-year-old anniversary has been canceled. Do you believe the security reasons given, or was it really a cowardly surrender to a fierce campaign to end the reenactment by a separatist blogger? And auto industry bailouts, do you support them during this harsh economic climate? Now let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Dr. George Breckenridge is a political scientist and professor at McMaster University, and Paul McKeever is leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario. And you, the viewer, you are our third guest. Feel free to call in at any time with any of your comments about any one of the subject matters we're addressing today, which takes us to our first item. Take a look at it up on your screen. So, can we stop bashing America now? Now, I don't know about you, but you may know there have been numerous books written about anti-Americanism here in Canada. It's something that started, I would say, even before the Bush era. There's always been a little bit of sibling rivalry, if you want to put it that way, between Canada and our southern neighbors. But with George Bush, it became a highlight, I would say. It became fashionable. It became the thing to do, to hate George Bush and hate him with a passion. But now that Barack Obama is in power, we're seeing a bit of a different shift. Now, according to this article, the question is asked, would you say that in Canada we're being hypocritical? Because when you look at some of the ideologies that Obama actually shares with Bush, for example, and this is going even further perhaps than Bush has gone, bombing Taliban targets in Pakistan, extending the war in Afghanistan, and even looking for more support. But we seem to have just accepted that with a smile, unchallenged. Quite the difference, a shift, I would say, in our stance toward the United States. So how do you feel about the U.S.? Did you once hate them and you feel a bit softer now? We want to know what your view is when it comes to anti-Americanism, the relationship between Canada and the United States, and why you feel that way. So join us at any time on that. And of course, our guest joining us today, I want to hear what your view is. You went over this article, you saw the issues being presented here, and the major question is, do you think we're being big hypocrites here in Canada when it comes to how we really feel about what the country should be when it comes to perhaps foreign affairs? I'm going to start with you on this one, Paul.
You know, I think it's a mistake to think that we're not anti-American anymore. It's just that Canadians now believe that America is not America anymore. That because it has a new president, it is now more like Canada. That it's throwing off its rugged individualism and becoming more collectivist and more altruistic and etc. And I think as a result of that, there's some forgiveness now of, you know, America has seen the error of its ways, and thank goodness it's now going to be a socialist nation like the rest of the world. But I think the reality is that that resentment which we've had, and I'm not saying me, but many Canadians have had against America, especially as it relates to having the Republican presidency, is a result of conservatism, on the one hand, pretending to be the voice of, say, capitalism and individual freedom, but on the other hand, touting with all its might all of that self-sacrifice, the altruism, which actually is entirely incompatible with capitalism, with the pursuit of one's own happiness. When you're saying that the best thing you can do in your life is to sacrifice for your fellow man, that is the altruism of socialism. So when a conservative comes out and says, I'm in favor of capitalism, and I care for my fellow man, the rational person says, you're a liar. and that conservatives lie. That, in fact, they're just trying to pretend that they care for their fellow man. They're lying about their ethics. And so the result has been conservatives, to prove just how altruistic they are, outspend any liberal they can possibly imagine on social programs, medical care, dental care, you name it, they'll spend it, all to prove just how self-sacrificial they are, which is why conservatives end up saying, what just happened? I thought that was supposed to be the capitalist party. It never was, and the reason was their morality was never consistent with individualism or capitalism. So everything's coming home to roost. An honest socialist has taken the presidency instead of a lying socialist.
Dr. Breckenridge.
Well, I mean, George Bush started out, billed himself as a compassionate conservative, and I guess you think that's a contradiction in terms.
Yes.
But he started out that way, but kind of lost the plot. I mean, they lost control of spending. There was no discipline, and that's certainly true. And part of that was under pressure of public opinion, and part of it was just the usual kind of need of members of Congress to grab as much as they can so they can boast to their districts and get reelected. That's partly what it did. But I mean, to call Obama a socialist is really, you know, it's really distorting the meaning of that word in a social. He's certainly left of center. He wants to do a lot of things that Bush didn't want to do. Like extending health insurance for people who don't have it and that sort of thing, and doing something about climate change. That doesn't make him a socialist as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you know, in European terms, he wouldn't be recognizable as a socialist at all. But he certainly wants to do a number of progressive things. I would prefer to use a term like that, which wants to use government to do certain things for society on the grounds that individuals can't do it for themselves.
But you see, when we look at the whole notion of socialism, there are many definitions, and I'm talking, it ends up being in the eyes of the beholder. For instance, people are looking at the stimulus package that was put out, and they're saying it's very socialistic. Well, stimulus packages, if you're studying economics, there's something called Keynesian economics. It's to do with stimulus packages, if you want to put it that way. The only difference is he perhaps went one step further by combining that with handouts and perhaps being more sympathetic when it comes to allowing in illegals into the country. So when it comes to the definition of socialist, I'm sensing from the two of you in your position, both of you are very different when it comes to defining this word. And I want to hear in your, but I want to hear what the two of you have to say about what your definition of socialism is before we go on from here.
Sure. I would define socialism, in fact, that's probably the subset. The broader term is collectivism. And the idea is that we're all in this together, that the wealth is all in one big pot, and that it all gets distributed by some means, either by a dictator or by will of the majority or by religious whim or whims of the majority. I mean, the idea of the collective is that we're all in this together, we're all responsible to our fellow man, and that implies altruism. It means that I don't have a right to exist if I'm not helping my fellow man to exist. I have no right to set up my own land, live my own life, pursue my own happiness, make that my purpose in life, even if I'm not helping someone else. Whereas the collectivist, that's the capitalist view. The collectivist view is the one that says, you know, you are your brother's keeper. And so the capitalist one is the one that says, no, you're not. It's the common law view, as opposed to, say, the civil law view, the Roman law view, which is that really we're all in this together.
Well, but that notion that we're all in this together and we all have some responsibility for one another, you could call it a Christian view. Never mind, you know, it doesn't have to be a socialist view. I mean, you know, I am my brother's keeper. I mean, so has very deep roots in the whole Western Judeo-Christian tradition.
Oh, yes.
So there's nothing alien about that at all. The socialism is an argument about how you do that. And again, there are various kinds of socialism.
It's not about balance. I mean, before the show today, I was telling you about this book that was written by two editors from Maclean's magazine. In fact, we did it. It's called, yesterday we featured it, it's called The Ego Boom. They talked about the roots of individualism in our country, which was to be admired. It was our founding fathers, both in the U.S. and Canada, adopted this view, and it had to do with the laws that we have today, our Constitution, the pursuit of happiness according to our laws, which is applauded in North American culture. And nothing is wrong with that, but there's a certain point at which it becomes, there's a sacrifice. And I don't mean it in a good way. You sacrifice the entire community because it becomes a selfish ambition and a selfish pursuit. And that is the one area that North Americans can't seem to come to grips with when it comes to the balance between pursuing your individual interest and at the same time looking out for the community. I mean, I'll give you an example. Even when we look at issues of multiculturalism, many of you watching have called and expressed how disgusted you were that our roots in this country are being eroded by people coming in, trying to change the laws, trying in Ontario to even bring in Sharia law. But you see, if you have no root and no foundation, you could end up with a problem. So where do we divide that line? Yeah. Which is why Obama seems to be attractive in the eyes of a lot of people, given this economic climate. Well, because people say he cares, he cares.
Well, America, there's no doubt America has a very strong streak of individualism, more so than most countries, more so than Europe, and more so than here. We have more of a collectivist, if you want to use that tradition. And of course, that also, if you go back to the philosophical roots, that's also the conservative, small c conservative tradition. Yeah. It's essentially a collective. The individual finds his or her place within the collective, and he has certain duties towards the collective and to one another. So you have all of these traditions, which are, and the problem in America, I think, and of course it's infected us as well, and it's infected other countries as well, is that individualism has been pushed to the point where the whole thing, sort of falls over and collapses.
See, I disagree entirely.
Well, you see, the trouble is there are so many things that individuals alone cannot do in society.
Paul, I'm going to have to ask you to hold your thought because we have to go for a break, but before we do so, I'm going to go to Andy on line 4. Hi, Andy, you're on the line.
Yeah, hi, Christine and guests. Anyways, all I have to say is, vis-a-vis the Canadian anti-American sentimentality, I think the rubber will hit the road, to be succinct, when Barak's economic policies are intermeshed, with our own prime ministers vis-a-vis American long-term isolation, protectionism, tariffs. Remember how long the softwood lumber war went on? 8 years, and we still never got the money, that was deserved to us. Look at NAFTA, look at WTO, I rest my case.
Okay, thanks for calling in, Andy. I think it's fair to say we're still in the honeymoon stage when it comes, or at least the U.S. is, when it comes to how Barack Obama's policies will translate. And I know you have some things to say there, Paul, about Barack Obama and where you say this is going. So we want to hear your views as well, so don't hesitate to call in. We're going to go for a break. We'll return after this. Don't go away.
This week on Real Life, we are keeping you fit with some great fitness segments, also keeping your family budget fit with ways to stretch your dollar. It's all coming your way this week on Real Life.
Is it a desk or the trusted keeper of a love story? Is it a bed or a fortress safe from monsters? Is it a couch or a fresh start in a new country? It's more than furniture to us, too.
Hi, it's Vince with ShamWow. You'll be saying wow every time you use this towel. It's like a chamois, it's like a towel, it's like a sponge. A regular towel doesn't work wet. This works wet or dry. This is for the house, the car, the boat, the RV. ShamWow holds 20 times its weight in liquid. Look at this. It just does the work. Why do you want to work twice as hard? Doesn't drip. Doesn't make a mess. Wring it out. You wash it in the washing machine. Made in Germany. You know the Germans always make good stuff. You can cut it in half. Use one as a bath mat. Drain your dishes with the other one. Use one as a towel. Olympic divers, they use it as a towel. Look at that, completely dry. Put a wet sweater, roll it up. It dries your sweaters. Here's some cola. Wine, coffee, cola, pet stains. Not only is the damage going to be on top, there's your mildew. That is going to smell. See that? The most observed. We're going to do this in real time. Look at this. Put on the spill, turn it over without even putting any pressure. 50% of the cola right there. You follow me, camera guy? The other 50%, the color starts to come up. No other towel is going to do that. It acts like a vacuum. And look at this, virtually dry on the bottom. See what I'm telling you? ShamWow, you'll be saying wow every time.
I can't live without it. I just love it.
Oh my gosh, I don't even buy paper towels anymore.
If you're going to wash your cars or any kind of vehicle, you'd be out of your mind not to own one of these.
All I can say is ShamWow.
You're going to spend $20 every month on paper towels anyway. You're throwing your money away. The mini ShamWows are for everything, for everyday use. This lasts 10 years. This lasts a week. I don't know, it sells itself. The ShamWow sells for $19.95, but you get one for the house, one for the car, two for the kitchen and bathroom. But if you call now, within the next 20 minutes, because we can't do this all day, we'll give you a second set absolutely free. So that's 8 ShamWows for $19.95. It comes with a 10-year warranty. Here's how to order.
Call 1-800-650-0214. That's 1-800-650-0214. ShamWow is not available in stores and is made in Germany. Beware of ShamWow imitators. Call 1-800-650-0214. That's 1-800-650-0214. Call now.
Again, welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line, continuing to talk about the question, what happened to anti-Americanism in Canada? The question to you, do you feel softer toward the United States ever since Barack Obama has come in as president? And Paul, I know we were in the middle of talking about, well, economic policy. Again, we were looking at some of the foreign policy. Yeah. And for some reason, Canada isn't batting an eyelash. No matter what they hear that might be similar to George Bush, it's okay if it comes from Barack Obama, but not George Bush. But you were going to say something about his policies. What was that?
With respect to that point, I think
yes.
once a conservative appears to be trying to sell capitalism, but at the same time claim he's an altruist, people, as I say, think he's a liar. Well, at that point, it doesn't matter what he's selling, whether it's good or bad, there must be a hidden motive. Yeah, there's a hidden agenda, and he's not to be trusted. And when an honest socialist comes out and says, yes, I'm actually for spending your money on your fellow man, and I'm for the socialist, the welfare state and everything else, well, at least I know he's telling the truth, because who else would say something like that? And so when he says, let's do all these things that Bush said he would do, he must be doing it for good reasons, because he doesn't lie about his reasons. You know, Bush invaded Iraq, and he only did it for the oil because there was no evidence. But if Obama's invading Iraq, well, we're going to know that it's only for good and just and honest reasons, because socialists like him don't lie. So that's what I think is ultimately going on there. But you were talking about tradition.
It's a trust factor.
There's a trust factor. Credibility is on the line, and the conservatives have blown their credibility.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but with respect to tradition, I mean the three things that the conservatives have always founded their advocacy of, to the extent that they even advocate capitalism anymore, they've always advocated on completely wrong bases. You could ask, what's happened to anti-Americanism in the United States? What's happened to anti-Americanism in the United States is that Americanism has disappeared. And all of the underlying morality that you have to care for your brother, that has remained. And so the political system has changed. Americanism is, in my view, just the politics. It never was the case that America had a sound ethical basis for its politics. And the ethics is what won the day. The ethics of you are your brother's keeper has won the day. Politics is the result of that, and they've moved, therefore, from individualism, which is not sustainable when you're your brother's keeper, to something more collectivistic. Yes. So it's not so much that anti-Americanism has died. They're still anti-American. It's just that nobody's practicing Americanism anymore.
Okay, Dr. Breckenridge, you're shaking your head there for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, the United States has two traditions, really, which have always intermingled. It has a strong individualistic tradition, individual rights and that sort of thing. But it also has a strong religious tradition. I mean, it was originally, if you go back to the Puritans, and these people are religious foundation.
Judeo-Christian roots.
Yeah, so it's these, and that is by definition, by your kind of definition, has clearly a collective response. There's a sense of collective responsibility.
So it's a mixed system you're looking at here.
That's right. So the two traditions have always lived side by side. Mostly they have cooperated and reinforced one another. Maybe that's what you're complaining about, but that's the real American tradition. That's the authentic American tradition. Now, the tradition which developed towards about 100 years ago or so in the real high capitalist era in America, became this kind of laissez-faire tradition. Governments stay out of things, and it's all individualism. But periodically, that has not worked. I mean, the Great Depression, you get a return to the sense of government has to act on behalf of the community. has to do things that individuals can't do for themselves, has to provide some kind of safety net, you know, this sort of thing. So there have been elements of both traditions, but the period in which it was sort of high capitalist, you know, no government, every person for themselves, is really actually fairly short. In American history.
Yeah,
it's not really the American tradition. It's just a...
But there seems to be a tug of war going on now, and many people have called it a war of cultures, the culture war. Some people declared it dead when Barack Obama came into power, but I want to hear what the two of you think about that. But first, let's go to Monica on line 4 from Alberta. Hello, Monica. You're on the line. Go ahead, Monica.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just calling in regards to... I was watching a show on TV last week, and a homeowner only had a $101,000 mortgage on their home, and their bank payment was $2,000 a month. To me, that's just unbelievable. As a homeowner in Canada, we have a lot higher mortgage than that, and we don't even pay close to that. Also, you know, in Canada here, you put your bank card into a bank machine, and in the United States, and they charge you $1.75 to $2.75 just to take money out of a banking machine. They make so much interest on mortgages, it's not even funny. How is it possible that a bank can even go out of business or need protectionism or need money from the government to bail them out? And people are losing their homes for no reason in the States because banks are so greedy. And the bank owner, the people that own the banks, are taking so much money from people and putting it into their own pockets that people are losing their homes for absolutely no reason.
I want to thank you for calling in. Now, I don't know what the two of you might have taken out of that, and I want you to comment if something comes to mind. But what Monica is saying here, it brings to mind that there is still a prevailing view of the United States. Although we're not hearing people lashing out at the States, these bullies, George Bush, we're still seeing the criticism that somehow we're better than them when it comes to our debt load, when it comes to how we view or how we approach capitalism.
Well, if you look at this economic crisis, there's no argument that it started in the banking system of the United States.
Yes, of course it did.
So
we're
right to blame them in a sense. And of course, the reason you get the crisis is because the banks didn't stick to their business as they were forced to do in Canada. They started gambling, you know, in the sense of, you know, borrowing huge amounts of money and then spending them on these very dubious products that nobody really understood.
Would you say that people in the States are greedier than us? Would you say that they're greedier than Canadians, people in the U.S., or is it just a different economic system over there? Well,
part of the individualistic tradition is that it tends to go too far. It tends to overreach, and you get this ultra-optimistic notion that things can go up forever. And everybody with any common sense knows things cannot go up forever. There's bound to be some kind of corrective at some point in time. But the Americans are perhaps more prone than most people, I think, because of this kind of individualistic, optimistic, you know, America's most, you know, is the only in America can you this, that, or the other happen. It tends to lead to this kind of boom and bust mentality. You know, and a number of times through the history, Canadians traditionally have been much more cautious, you know, about where they put their money and what they do with their money, and the banks have behaved a lot better than the American banks have done.
Paul, I want to hear what you have to say about this, because you're a self-professed capitalist,
yes.
right? Okay,
yes.
Okay, let's hear what you have to say here.
Two things. The current banking crisis is the result of expansion of the money supply and contraction of the money supply. And you cannot have a stable economy so long as you're expanding and contracting the money supply. There ought to be a 100% reserve on all money that's loaned out, so that for every dollar that's being borrowed, there's actually a dollar sitting in the bank. But that's the technical reason, and probably beyond the scope of our discussion. As long as we have fractional reserve banking, we're going to have these booms and busts. Yeah. But apart from that, it's one thing to say individualism. That talks about, you know, egoism, perhaps. I'm looking, you know, with the center, the focus is on me. But just because you think the focus is on you doesn't mean it really is. There's a difference between hedonism, in other words, do it because it feels right or because you want to, and actually rationally pursuing what's good for your life and good for your happiness. Rational egoism is never, you know, self-defeating. It never fails because it's rational. It's connected with the facts of reality. We get in trouble when we start thinking that we can borrow ourselves into wealth, that we can thieve ourselves into wealth, that the government can create something out of nothing, that either the government or a supernatural entity or a witch in a dime store psychic ward can somehow give me effortless existence. I can live without effort. I don't have to think. I don't have to work. Conservatism is a perfect example of trying to support individualism and capitalism by anything other than reason. What are the three ways they do it? One, God said capitalism was good. Two, it's old, it's traditional, we've always done it, therefore it's good. Three, you know what? Man is so evil that if we were to put a human being in charge, a dictator, you know, we would all be enslaved. But if we were all moral and good, then we'd love, you know, so in other words, if we were all moral, then the ideal form of government would be dictatorship. None of these arguments work. The first one says that the left is right because, you know, you're saying that the left has reason to themselves, we have faith. The second one says, we have tradition, they have the future, they have what's progressive and moving forward. The third says, man is a horrible beast, whereas the left is saying, no, he's not. I mean, how can you say, by saying, we don't think reason's useful, we think that only the past is any good, the old, the rotten, the stagnant is any good, and we think that man is an immoral beast, and therefore we deserve capitalism? What, you might as well be writing the death warrant for capitalism and individualism. And that's exactly what the conservatives have done. I think that what needs to happen is not a flip to collectivism, not a return to tradition, but rather, whether you're left or right, an acknowledgement of the facts of reality, and that there are some things that the facts of reality do not permit. You can't get something from nothing. And that the only way you can figure out what you can and cannot do is by being rational at all times. Don't guess, don't presume, have the evidence, and act only on the evidence, assume everything else is false, and don't govern any other way.
Dr. Breckenridge,
I don't think individuals are capable of sustaining that kind of rationality for very long. So.
Would you say that we're in a limbo right now? I mean, we're still in the honeymoon phase with Barack Obama's presidency.
Of course, he's only been there for a month.
We're in a limbo.
That's right.
Okay, now I think that's fair to conclude on for this topic. We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, the battle over the Plains of Abraham, well, it was going to be reenacted. In fact, it was touted as being the event to behold for Quebec City. But something different happened. It's no more. Why? Well, on one hand, we're being told it's because of security reasons, because separatists, and I'm talking radical separatists, have threatened to disrupt the event. But on the other hand, did we give way to political correctness? I'll tell you more after the break. Stay tuned.
Before some of these people open up, you know what they're going to say. They're going to the other person's rotten. Yeah. They can't give the other person 5 points to do this right or that right. Yeah.
What is the point in going to Spin Alley? But it's part of this. As we said before, it's part of the 24-hour news cycle. They need to fill it with something.
We're always worried if we're putting enough money into our RRSPs, but we don't have those concerns anymore. Our only regret was, why didn't we come sooner?
Now's the time to meet and discuss your RRSPs. Whether you want to reduce your year-end tax burden or determine if you're on track to meet your retirement goals. AD Vaca and Associates. Come see what you've heard. Call us today.
Financial foundations on the solid rock.
You'll never see a headline about the thousands of children who died yesterday from hunger. But that doesn't make it any less real for a child like Fidel. Today, just like yesterday and the day before, Fidel's only meal will consist of a few noodles boiled in water with a little salt for flavor. It has absolutely no nutritional value. This thin soup is all they have.
I'm very worried. What will become of my children? I can't give them what they need to eat.
Fidel's mother has already buried one child. The thought of losing another is just unbearable.
My sister and I got sick, and she almost died. My mama cried so much.
All it takes is one caring person like you to change the life of a child like Fidel through World Vision Child Sponsorship. Call World Vision or go online at worldvision.ca and sponsor a child. Of the 150 million children around the world who are suffering from hunger and malnutrition, thousands will die today. Now think about that. Thousands of child deaths that could easily have been prevented.
If they get sick again, I don't know what I'll do.
World Vision has photos and stories of thousands of children just like Fidel who are looking for a sponsor. My family and I have been sponsors for many, many years. We have seen the way it not only changes a child's life, but entire communities as well. You can start changing one life today. Believe me, it will change your life too.
Call 1-800-971-4910 and sponsor a child. That's 1-800-971-4910.
Again, welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Well, take a look at the second topic that we're discussing now. Battle over Plains of Abraham shows Canada's small, timorous heart. Well, that's an insult, what Christy Blanchford is saying here. In fact, she starts off her article by talking about the many little events in her life that made her nauseous. And she concludes by facing up to what took place, or what is taking place as we speak, about the reenactment over the Plains of Abraham, reenacting the battle. Now that's a 250th anniversary coming up. That was supposed to be a major highlight of Quebec City. Yeah. And then you have this blogger, Patrick Bourgeois. He's a separatist blogger, but not only that, he happens to also be an editor of a sovereigntist paper. He actually decided to go ahead with a fierce campaign to put an end to that reenactment, because it's seen by some still as the day that the British gained victory over the French. That's how it's seen by many of the separatists. So he got angry about this thing, and he rallied up enough support that there were threats given that if this battle, this reenactment were to take place, that they will disturb the events of the day. So basically, we gave up. Now, do you call it being a coward? Bowing to separatist extremists? Was it a good thing for Canadians to do? When you look at tradition, I mean, reenactments take place all the time in celebration of history. We see it in the States, we see it at different points here in Canada as well. But to make matters worse, the Bloc, the Parti Québécois, believe it or not, decided to disassociate themselves with this man, Patrick Bourgeois, saying that they don't want to have anything to do with him. In fact, they were in his paper before, being featured as part of his paper. They've now distanced themselves from this separatist blogger. So the question that we're engaging in is, do you really buy that it was a security issue in the best interest of everybody involved? Or was it just, we gave up to political correctness, we didn't want to offend people, we were afraid to, number one, offend people, number two, maybe even deal with the possible violence from the fallout? At what point do you stand up and say, well, this is a worthwhile battle, pardon the pun, or do you just give it up and say it's not worth it? I'm going to start with you on this one, Dr. Breckenridge.
Well, I mean, this is too bad. I mean, it was meant to be a kind of an interesting and fun and educational event, I think. That's what these reenactors do. They do it all over the world.
And it's very popular for tourism.
It's not, as I understand it, it's not about who won the battle. It's about how was the battle fought. You know, the strategy, the tactics, and all the rest of it. And, you know, so it could have been quite an interesting event, but when you're faced with the fact, I don't know how violent, I don't imagine it would have become violent, but it would have been disrupted. And so the decision by the National Battlefield Commission was whether to push ahead in spite of threats to disrupt it, you know, by counter demonstrations or something like that, or whether to back down and say, well, okay, you know, this isn't very popular in Quebec. I think it's too bad, because it could have been the highlight of the Quebec summer season. You know?
Yes, and it would have been great for tourism in Quebec City.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this one, Paul?
Well, I have one painting over my desk, and it's Wolf dying on the Plains of Abraham. My son's named after him. So I have a little bit of difficulty saying too much bad about the reenactment. On the other hand, I don't think that you know, a reenactment is the thing upon which to make a big fuss. not in favor of, not the kind of thing I like to go out and see, not the kind of thing I don't like to go and see. I just have no interest in it. But I think what the government did here was said, let's not give the secessionists any fire to play with. They were looking for some opposition. They were looking for something newsworthy to report. They wanted to make it look as if big, bad old English Canada is beating up on Quebecers and Quebecois. And they wanted to make it, to rouse the passions and create opposition and create dissension. But I don't think it was right not to take the bait. I think they should have taken the bait. I think they should have proceeded nonetheless, even though this wasn't the hill to die on necessarily. I think they should have tried. They should have gone ahead with the reenactment. They should have let those paintballers or whatever come out, and they should have thrown them to the ground, thrown the cuffs on them, and thrown them in the paddy wagon. You know, in Canadian history, among prime ministers, we used to have a masculine prime minister. The last one we had was Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And the rest, as Christy Blatchford said, were, you know, bushes and insects or whatever it is. They're not mighty oaks and eagles. He was a mighty oak and eagle. He was a socialist, and I don't praise him for that. But when the murderers in Quebec were going around murdering people, trying to create distress between Quebec and the rest of Canada.
You're talking about the FLQ there?
You bet, the FLQ. Yeah. He stood and defended his position.
Yes, he did. And he did. That earned him greatness in our country.
Yeah, sure, but
standing up against the FLQ.
That was a really serious threat of violence. I mean, there was violence.
That's right.
That was a really serious situation.
Right.
This is a little different.
And he still stood up, though. As serious as it was and as violent as it was, he still stood up to the FLQ.
And he looked
that was the right thing to do.
And that was the right thing. Yeah.
Yes. He not only stood up to the FLQ, he stood up to the CBC. I mean, he was surrounded by reporters who said, look at this, we've got tanks in the streets, or military vehicles in the streets. Isn't this wrong? Aren't you a dictator? Isn't this horrible? And he said, what would you have me do? Would you prefer that they just go ahead and murder people? Is that what you would prefer? And well, how far are you prepared to go, Mr. Prime Minister? Just watch me. And he did. He nailed that thing. It's over. And that is the kind of thing that was necessary only because at an earlier stage, more definite steps weren't taken. If you don't take steps when some lowly newspaper editor is threatening to paintball people at a military reenactment, he will wait for the next biggest thing. He's just won that in some ways.
That's the big question. Have we become a nation of wusses, and what's the fallout going to be? Let's go now to Les on line 5. Hi, Les. You're on the line.
Hello?
Hi, go ahead.
Yes, first of all, the gentleman that made the comment regarding the eunuchs that have been running this country was an excellent, excellent comment, first of all. Second of all, I believe based on, you know, all of the blackmail and this business that we're talking about today that's been going on, it's time for another referendum. The only difference is this referendum should be us, English Canada, out west, everywhere, making a decision whether or not we want that parasite to remain part of Canada. I personally feel we should let them go a long time ago, let them take their portion of the deficit and the debt, let all the contracts that Canada has internationally leave them because they're made with Canada, not with a sovereign Quebec. Maybe we can sell them to France for a good case of wine and, you know, maybe a pork roast or something. I don't know.
Well, Les, you've certainly spoken your mind, and hey, we're built on a democracy. I applaud that, but I want to hear the feedback of what you're going to say here, because,
I don't want to be lumped in with Les on that. I disagree with Les entirely with respect to Quebec.
The attitude toward Quebec.
Yeah, not at all.
He spoke his mind, and we applaud him for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that he likes that I like Pierre Elliott Trudeau's response to the FLQ, but I entirely must disagree with him with respect to the attitude toward Quebec and the idea that they're parasites. There are parasites who live in every country who try to break up every country, but they are not the Quebec people as a whole. No. They are not the province of Quebec. They are not English-speaking Canadians. They are not the rest of Canada. There are a small handful of largely radical leftists who run little newspapers like the one in question, who are trying constantly to create a dislike among Canadians, to divide Canadians and try and turn Quebecers against the rest of Canada, and the rest of Canada against Quebec. And the caller in question, I apologize, but I'm sorry, sir, you're in that camp as well.
And again,
that's
why we're
trying
here, to have that dialogue.
Yes, you're trying to aggravate tensions between Quebec and the rest of Canada. That's not appropriate.
Well, okay,
but we have to target the secessionists, and we should not ever be allowing them to call the shots. There's only one response to a secessionist who's willing to use violence, and that is pull them into the paddy wagon.
Yes. Well, if there was violence, that's right. Obviously, that's the right. But this is somewhat different, I think. The thing we have to bear in mind is that the defeat of Quebec, the capture of Quebec by Britain in 1759, remains a sensitive issue in Quebec. I mean, because Quebecers have been taught that their identity, you know, has been at risk, and it ended the dream of a kind of a French empire in North America, that sort of thing. So it's been played on year after year after year. It's a sensitive issue, and so it's not just. I don't think it's just this one, you know, this one radical blogger. I think he probably had wider sympathy in Quebec. Now, I still think it's a pity that people can't get past that and simply recognize this reenactment for what really it was intended to be.
Exactly. There are staunch separatists, but I'm glad Les called in, and let me tell you specifically why. This is not the first time we've had a caller call in to express complete disgust because a small group of individuals have managed to accomplish something that they're basically grieving about. We see that happening, and I'm not going to disguise it here. We see it happening with some of the Muslim persuasion, where they basically hijack the entire religion, see it as something where this is what they reflect, when they see it as a very fundamental way, trying to, if you have any knowledge about what Durban 1 was about, this was a United Nations conference, an anti-racism conference. Durban 1 ended up being a complete fiasco. It was basically hijacked by people's their own desires to, how do I put this delicately? There's no way to put it delicately. It was a movement against Israel. And what it was a movement to further the cause of Sharia law, of a handful, a certain type of Muslim. Yes, go ahead.
Well, it's always unpleasant and dangerous in a sense when you see extremists accomplishing a small minority accomplishing which the majority don't support.
We saw it happen in Ontario when a group of individuals tried to bring in Sharia law in Ontario. It didn't happen, and the moderate Muslims were very much responsible for that not happening.
That's right.
But more and more, we struggle as a society with special interest groups that have a lot of power in our country or in our society as a whole, managing to sway the general direction. And this is where reasonable accommodation comes in. And I've heard the kind of a passion with Les before.
It's particularly unpleasant when it's, you know, it's a threat to disrupt something like this. You know, or even potentially cause some violence. And that's, but the question is always, what's the best way to deal with it? Is the best way to deal with it head on and charge ahead and nevertheless? I think because there's actually broader sympathy in Quebec for that position.
Yes, there is.
Opposed to it, and that's probably the reason why they backed down.
Yes.
The way I see the Plains of Abraham and the whole historical thing is that it's not as though the English beat the French or the French were defeated by the English. It's that England beat France. Really, it was a government, one foreign government beat another foreign government. But the rest of us were just living here, carrying on trade, living with one another, and you know what the outcome was who was the head of state, and did we have the common law tradition, or we even have the civil law tradition in Quebec, so in that respect things didn't even change that much. So really, what is it? It's a defeat, perhaps, of France, and maybe a victory for England, but we're not England and we're not France.
Yeah, but you bring up a very interesting point, which seems to be one of the, some will say flaws, and some will say it's a great thing of multiculturalism, where you look at the U.S. and they have a very, very strong national identity, whereas here in Canada, we remain very loyal to multiculturalism, where people come in, and it doesn't matter if it's generations ago, their loyalty, in many cases, is more toward the country of their forefathers, as opposed to the whole national identity. There are many that are asking, what's even the identity of Canadians?
I don't think that's really true. I think the Canadian identity is a lot stronger.
You think it's strong?
I think it's stronger than we think it is. Because we can't define it and wave flags the way the Americans do, doesn't mean that we don't have a good, strong, healthy national identity. I think we do.
Do you think we have a strong identity there, Paul?
I'm not sure what an identity is in terms. I think if America has an identity, it's in its political traditions. And Canada doesn't have a strong political tradition.
We don't have the same kind. It's not based on the same thing.
True.
Right, and so we don't have a history of. And that's not quite true. I mean, the birth of individualism was actually in I would say, Holland and Britain with John Locke, depending on which country he was trying to avoid at the time, or one of his fellow men. And you know, the idea that you have rights of life, liberty, and property is a European idea that was influencing those who went, like Thomas Jefferson, and those who formed and drafted the Declaration of Independence and the constitutional documents. So we could claim largely to have the same tradition. We have the tradition of John Locke. Our British forebears are there in Canada as well.
I'm going to have to interrupt the two of you because we must go for a break. After the break, I'm going to get straight to you on the phone line, so don't go away. Stay tuned.
As much as I hate to admit it, your aunts were right and I was wrong. But don't you dare tell them you hear me.
The secret's safe with me.
I don't know what you guys are doing, but don't stop.
Every McDonald's Egg McMuffin is made with a freshly cracked Canada Grade A large egg. Enjoy one today.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. These words begin one of the most important prayers in all of Christianity. And now this very special prayer can always be kept close to your heart with the prayer cross from Montebello Collections. This one-of-a-kind cross features a secret center stone, which when held up to the light, reveals the entire Lord's Prayer right before your eyes. Watch as people gaze in amazement as they experience the magic of the prayer cross for the first time. Each prayer cross is handcrafted using genuine Austrian crystal and solid sterling silver, creating not only a magnificent piece of jewelry, but a one-of-a-kind spiritual accessory. When held up to the light, the entire Lord's Prayer becomes instantly and almost miraculously visible. Available in both adult and child sizes, the prayer cross makes the perfect gift for any occasion. Each prayer cross comes with a certificate of authenticity and is beautifully gift boxed. A great way to share the faith for christenings, communions, or confirmations. Ideal for birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations. The prayer cross is the perfect way to say Happy Easter or Merry Christmas and is sure to bring joy and comfort to all who wear it and astonish those who see the hidden prayer inside. Genuine Austrian crystal, solid sterling silver with matching chain and gift box included. Order your prayer cross now for just 2 payments of only $29.95. Each prayer cross comes with our unconditional 30-day money-back guarantee. Beautifully designed, comforting to all who wear it, and the perfect way to keep the Lord's Prayer close to your heart. Call the number on your screen now to receive your prayer cross for just 2 payments of only $29.95. Here's how to order.
Hello again. Welcome back to Viewpoints on the line. Let's go now to Gloria on line 5. Hi, Gloria. You're on the line.
Okay. I was listening to your program and about the separation from Canada and Quebec. I agree with the gentleman on the left that said people from other countries come here to change all the rules. If Canada separate from Quebec, will be no Canada whatsoever. We have to stay together to be one. So I agree with everything that he said. People who are from another country come here to make their rules. They better go back to their country and make their rules there instead of come here and try to change it. You know, because should have been trying to keep Canada together for a long time. And why would somebody who come and do not know anything about Canada want to change the rule?
Gloria, thanks for calling in. This is what I hear over and over again. Right here on the line, we've covered a lot of the multicultural issues, and I've heard blame passed about immigrants coming into this country, wanting to change it. It's a small number, because the vast amount of immigrants that have called into this show, at least, they don't want to change Canada.
No,
they don't want to see it happen. I mean, but the small number needs to be controlled.
We were talking about the difference between the identities. I mean, the Americans have a homogeneous kind of identity around politics. The Canadian tradition really is a tradition of accommodation between two different traditions, between the French and the English. And we've really kind of built on that, I think, in many ways, in what has been a very healthy way. So that there are always some people, you know, who complain, some people who are worried about new people coming in, the other people coming in, and some of the other people who want to have things their own way. But the vast majority of people, we keep, you know, adjusting slightly as the composition of the country changes. It's always been like that. And it's a very healthy thing. We've done it very well.
And traditions per se, I mean, traditions should never be, you know, what governs a country.
No.
If you have a country that simply respects every individual's life, liberty, and property, then every individual is free to either be innovative with the things they do, change the things they do, or to stay stuck in the same old ways that their grandparents did it before them. So traditions are fine if you choose to use them. They're not my idea of how to conduct my life. I look at the best way to do everything on a case-by-case basis. If technology changes, I change too. But I don't want to impose that on anybody. And you know, if you want to live in the mountains and you know, live off of wood heat and cook your own pigs, well, go right ahead instead of engaging in shopping at A&P. But I think it is wrong to suggest that culture, when it's, let's say, people from a culture where it's you know, from another country or whatever, what have you, comes to Canada, that we suddenly have to fund their traditions. That, in other words, tradition should be the way in which we preserve Canadian culture. I don't think Canadian traditions are what is Canadian. What's Canadian is the accommodation of everyone's freedom to do whatever traditions or non-traditions that they want to do. It's the freedom they came here for. So that although they may enjoy wearing a certain kind of clothes or eating a certain kind of food, they know that when they come here, if they choose to go to McDonald's and wear jeans, nobody's going to be sending them to jail. So that's what makes Canada great, and I think as long as we remember that, then the fact that someone comes from a dramatically different culture is zero threat to Canada.
I agree, I agree.
As long as they don't threaten our free speech, and that was a major one that came up with Ezra Levant, and you know how I feel about that one. But we're going to actually touch our last subject matter now, because we have a few minutes to do so, and it concerns the auto bailouts. Take a look at it, okay? Because this whole notion about bailouts has been on the front page of many publications for some time now, and the big question is, what do we support? What do we not support? Because here we have this article, and Industry Minister Tony Clement, in this article that you just saw, Minister insists auto industry bailout, not money for nothing. He's actually promised to, quote, not flush Canada's money down the toilet. He's saying that when you look at our industry, the government has decided to give loans with major conditions attached. So it's not a case of just freebie money just being handed out. But on the other hand, here's the criticism of that particular statement. Kevin Gaudette of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, he said, the government shouldn't be giving 1 red cent. In fact, Kevin Gaudette was part of On the Line. He was on our show not too long ago. And him, like many others, are saying, you're talking about a loan, but who says you're even going to get it back? And let's face it, that's a logical criticism as well. So where do you stand in the bailouts?
These are very difficult situations. I mean, the car industry, the domestic car industry has been in transition. Because it's met competition from the foreign car makers and that sort of thing. But in addition to that, so things were changing, and they've been downsizing, they've been cutting back and that sort of thing. But then suddenly they're hit with this financial crisis, which really has got them floundering.
And that's the crux here.
That's the problem. You know, you want to, the change is inevitable, I think. You can either say, well, just stand back and let it happen.
And let it fall.
The trouble with that
which will worsen the economy.
So many people get so badly hit, you know, and the government has to do something to try and ease the transition. That's really what they're trying to do.
Now, Paul, I'm curious to hear what you're going to say. You're a capitalist, but at the same time, the economy is really bad right now. What would you support here?
I would support the economy, which is what you do when you allow capital to go to productive uses rather than to losing companies. If a thing is a proven loser, it's like a bonfire. You don't throw money into it and say, let's keep it burning a little longer.
Cut it loose?
So you wouldn't do anything?
No, I would let it go through the natural bankruptcy process, and I'd let the companies that are strong...
The invisible hand approach.
You bet. Now, the thing is, the government doesn't have money. It takes money from people who earn it. It redistributes money. It doesn't earn anything. It doesn't create anything of value. So all the government can do is take it from those who earn and spend it on those who don't.
Go ahead, George.
No, that's much too simplistic. I mean, government, you can argue about any particular expenditure, but government takes money and does things on our behalf, which individuals cannot do for themselves.
Wait, that's false. I can invest in General Motors if I want to, but nobody wants to invest in General Motors because they're sane. They know that that thing's on the precipice of bankruptcy, and only an insane politician would take my money and spend it. They're taking it and spending it on GM because they know darned well I won't do it voluntarily.
Well, so in the meantime, as the car industry, if you let the car industry collapse, many thousands of people in Canada, the United States, are suddenly thrown out of work at the worst possible time. You're not going to do anything about that, eh? I'm just saying
I want the car industry to survive, and that's exactly why you have to let the failing companies fail. Yeah, I mean, Honda's not suffering like General Motors is.
You have to try and manage the transition, otherwise it's far too painful.
You're just spreading the pain around.
For too many people.
Your management is spreading the pain to those that are productive.
Just when this is heating up, our program has come to an end. See you again next time. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.
I don't mean to nitpick.
Don't forget to watch Family Ties every weekday at 4:30.
We don't have to, we do it because we enjoy it.
A cast of characters who can always make you laugh.
I am just trying to get your affairs in order, that's all.
The music, the message, and the love of God. Joy 1215.
Catch the spirit.
You're always on the go. So First Choice Hair Cutters lets you pop in anytime. For fresh cuts, colors, and styles that are so easy to love. First Choice Hair Cutters. Style to go.
Precious Lord, take my hand.